Hello and welcome. Recently we posted a video about the many roles that fixed-wing aircraft and helicopters perform in the north of Australia. That included the work of aerial mustering of cattle by helicopters. The Rotary Wing Show features an interview of helicopter mustering pilot Sam Chisholm. The audio could be better, but the story is worth it. Sam grew up on cattle properties and got into helicopter flying early, spending the last 16 years flying and mustering in rural Australia. Cattle are big business in Australia. There are about 25 million head of cattle and the industry employs somewhere around about 200,000 people. So, Australia is the third largest beef exporter in the world. The cattle industry is also responsible for a sizable proportion of the annual helicopter hours flown in Australia. I saw that in 2004 there were around about 62% of all Robinson R22 flight hours in Australia conducted in aerial mustering. I know helicopters are used for mustering a little bit in the US, in Texas, and in New Zealand also. Mustering hasn't always had the best reputation, maybe because it is conducted away from regulatory oversight. There have also been a fair number of incidents and accidents, and immediate medical help can be far away. So let's get into it and hear from Sam.
I grew up on Nappinski Station, which is 200 kilometres northwest of Alice Springs in the Northern Territory. We always had helicopters coming and going to muster the cattle. Alice Springs doesn't use as many helicopters as Northern Australia, but there's such vast areas that to get the cattle out of the paddocks, it used to be done on horseback, and it's pretty inefficient in this day and age. A job that one can do in a helicopter, or one person can do in a helicopter, used to take 14 people a couple of weeks on horseback. So we always had the helicopters coming out, and so from a young age, I guess I was exposed to them, and they used to go and pitch Dad's ear and give it to the pilots because they'd take me for a ride. So I've been around them a little while.
And how big was your property growing up there, in terms of, just to give people a bit of an idea of scale? We'll talk about some big properties later on, but yeah, how big was your property?
It was 1.5 million acres, so it's about 90 kilometres by 60 kilometres. That was roughly the size of that. So to drive around it, to do a bore run and check all the waters on the way, was 500 k's round trip, and you can do that. You can do that. Dad had a Cessna 182, and he could do the water run in a couple of hours, but of course he couldn't stop anywhere. I did my training on the Gold Coast, or Coolangatta Airport with PHS.
And Sam, did you go straight for the commercial license?
Yeah, straight for commercial.
You can actually do mustering on a private license. What was the process before you felt pretty comfortable that you knew what you were doing?
When I started, I worked for Kinsey Ward up in Kununurra, and I got into town in the afternoon, and I think he was looking for someone a bit older than me, 18 baby face, but there I was. So we went out he had the lease on El Questro station, and I went out there, and the next morning I was on the Jules and mustering, and we did a fair bit of Jewel, and then for the must of it, and then you've got to have 100 hours in command. We used to, I'm not sure what it is now, but you used to have to have 100 hours in command before you could do your mustering endorsement, and 10 hours of Jewel. So I got the 10 hours of Jewel, but I still had to do it.
And what height are you doing it?
Depends on the country. If you've got thicker country, you've got to be lower and slower. But if you're out in the open, or sort of some of these flowing hills and the cattle are all going along, you might do it 1,000 feet, 2,000 feet. It just depends. It's sort of a 45-degree angle, I suppose. If you're out on the Barkby, or those places are just open downs, I guess. You can muster those at 3,000 feet. You just, everything's going good. You can see what's happening. No stress. It's nice and cool up the top there.
So that's 3,000 AGL, or
Yeah.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. I thought everything would be like 500 AGL.
No, the majority is, but you can definitely do it. And it's the cattle work off the noise, so they don't work off you, and you as a stockman are moving those cattle from pressure and release. So if you put pressure on the cattle and they start moving away from you, then you don't need to be there. You can back off them while they're traveling, and if you can still see them while they're traveling, you can be over getting some other cattle started, and when they get going, and if the other ones that you just started stop, well, you might go and give them another little bump along, but it's just pressure and lead. So when everything is traveling well, you can sit back and relax. And that's the trick to seeing cattle. It's a lot easier to see them when they're moving. You pick them up a lot easier. When they're standing dead still, they're hard to see. And then quite often, if one of those is a professional at hiding and he's got a few friends who don't really know the game, but they'll learn very quickly off them. So you want to make sure you try and get them all every time.
So would they be home every night, or do you take you pack a swag and a backpack and put it in the seat and take it?
If you're working close to town, but Lindsay, he was big on never leave home without your swag, because as soon as you do, you'll get caught out. And nowadays, you don't camp out as much as you used to. Even the stock camps, the crews that were working the cattle, they used to camp out a lot more. A lot of mustering is the pilots get paid hourly rate, so you want to be out working as much as you can, because it's a season. So the mustering season is typically say March, April to November. So you've got the quiet months, which is the wet season when it's raining, hot and raining. It's not conducive to mustering cattle, so you hook in as much as you can.
Is there enough money in it that if you were busy during that season, could you take the rest of the year off? Like, is there enough money in it to do that?
Yeah. I used to do that quite a lot and go overseas and do silly adventures whenever I could. Yeah, it's good. It's a good lifestyle. You don't have, apart from you're away a lot, if you can get used to that idea, which for a lot of people, for me, I loved it, and that was fine. And you don't have any outgoings because you're not paying any rent. You're staying at all the cattle stations. You get fed everywhere you go. So you say everything you make, you're saving. It's no outgoings at all. And then you get all this time to go and do what you want over the wet Victoria River Downs, which is sort of in the middle of the Northern Territory, I suppose. It's about 3 hours from Catherine, and they've got a far reach, but it is a long way down to Alice Springs for them. It's hard to get. If you get too far spread as a mustering company and you break down, it's logistically difficult. But they had a spare machine, so I took that down to Alice and did a little bit of work around there. And then when they'd get busy at VRD, I'd fly up and give them a hand. And so it was quite good. I did that for 2 years.
Well, before we leave the mustering side of things, if you look at the accident rates, and I'm sure CASA and ADSB would love to carve out those accidents out of their figures, but it's a reasonably high accident rate in that mustering fleet. Have you had any experiences yourself, or is it something like it's just everyone knows someone who's had an accident type thing? Like, how when you're talking to other people, is it coming up frequently that someone's written a helicopter off? What's it sort of like?
I think, it's a small industry, so everyone knows everyone. But since I've been flying, it's gotten a lot better. I think it's maybe more training, but maybe a bit less pilot fatigue. I reckon back in the day, they probably just flew daylight till dark and kept on going like that throughout the whole season. And now it's a bit stricter. I think a lot of the accidents, for the amount of hours that get flown, when you look at it like that, the accidents per hour aren't as high. And then a lot of the accidents is junior pilots that haven't had the training as well. So I think that's probably why the accident rate's gone down. But it is a dangerous job. And I wrecked a helicopter. I had 400, and they say you're most dangerous when you've got 500 to 1,500 hours, because it's when you're confident, you get your ambitions and your capabilities mixed up. And I think I had 499 hours, and I got out to fix a fence. And we used to have these collective locks which were made of leather, and they're now bungee cords, so they can't come off. But I've gone in and grabbed a pair of pliers or something and knocked the cord off, or knocked the leather off, or didn't put it on properly, and I was fixing the fence, and the helicopter took off and smashed itself to pieces. So I guess that wasn't in it, but still counts on the tally sheet.
Was that a long
stupid stuff like?
Was that a long day to get home?
Yeah, it was a more nervous couple of days to get back to my boss, hoping that he wasn't going to kill me. He was good about it. He said, "Well, I think you'll never do that again." And it was a good learning experience for other people as well, because you just get complacent, and you shouldn't. We're allowed to get out of the helicopters to fuel up and just see what that's it, really. I probably shouldn't have been fixing a fence. But the moral of the story is you check twice before you do something.
For a helicopter pilot, low stress handling really means that we work the cattle slowly and calmly and take them steady. Some breeds of cattle need to go slower than others. As soon as they do the right thing, we fly away. And then so that the mental demand's gone and the physical demand's gone. That's their reward. So it's kind of pressure on, pressure off. So we create pressure when they're not doing the right thing, and when they're doing the right thing, there's no pressure. So they learn to search for what we want them to do. I think if we can keep the cattle calm and keep them steady, and the ground crew does the same thing, helicopter mustering is very easy and it doesn't become a dangerous job. Most of our, probably 90-95% of our mustering is done at 500 to 600 feet, and at a rate probably 50 or 60 knots, which is quite safe. Everyone works together trying to get the cattle and the animals as good as we can, so that it is safe and we can fly at those heights and at those speeds, and you're not near trees, you're not down on the ground chasing them around. When I started, I was kind of taught that you had to fly hard, and if you could turn a helicopter inside out, you're a good pilot. And that the culture of that whole thing has changed to becoming a good cattle person and flying around being safe and steady, and that's what's seen as being a great pilot. The ground crew for a mustering pilot plays a just as important role as what a good helicopter pilot does. A good helicopter pilot can be a very good cattleman, and he can do the right thing by the animals to where he's going to take them. But if they're delivered to people that are going to mistreat them some way, those cattle will not be the same next time. That's why we all have to work together. The ground crew has to treat them properly. Because we might do 3 or 4 jobs a day, I've got to be able to tell my clients that I'll be here at 8 or they're at 10, because I know how much time it's going to take to do that paddock. What happens in our industry is if there's a change of ground crew to that property, that paddock might have taken me 3 hours for the last 10 years. If that ground crew changes and those people mistreat those cattle in some way from where I've taken them to, those cattle then, the next time I muster them, could take me 4 hours, and then it'll take 5 hours. And you can end up being cattle that used to take you 3 hours and have no trouble at all, to where you're there 5 and 6 hours, just because the ground crew has changed and changed the mental conditioning of those animals not to want to go where you want to take them. So they're the things that make our industry more dangerous. Different herds have their own culture by the way they've been conditioned, by the way they've been worked. And you can go from property to property, it could be even next door property. Those animals can be very, very hard to handle. And any animal that gets in with those animals will then change mentally just by running with them. Because as soon as they hear a helicopter run past, they will go and hide. So then that gets passed on to the younger animals, and then that stays in that culture of those cattle, for a long time until you get rid of those. So once they're mentally scarred, it's pretty much locked in and it'll stay like that. Probably some of the most valuable lessons I've learnt helicopter mustering is when I take off I just think power lines. You know, as soon as my skids leave the ground, I think power lines. If I get to power line height, I get nervous. There's a lot of frights. As you get older, you get less. But when you're first starting, you get a lot of frights, and you always check your fuel. That's the things you can look after. The ground crew have got to be educated around the helicopters. That's a big thing, is people around your helicopter. And when you get in the helicopters, you only think about what you're doing, not something else. I think the biggest advice I could give, to sit in with someone for as long as you can. Don't be in a hurry to get out and go by yourself. To be a mustering pilot, to go with someone with a lot of cattle sense, to teach you how cattle think and how you work them, will save you a lot of hard flying and a lot of being put into situations where it's going to be difficult for you. I'd be in no hurry to go out on your own, and the more time you can spend in with someone with a lot of experience, I think the safer you're going to be. If you send someone to where the cattle are bad and the cattle don't have any respect or been ruined by motorbikes or, you know, other helicopters, that's what you don't want a young pilot to be going and doing. It's too dangerous. For instance, there's some jobs that you're not going to be able to yard those cattle with a helicopter. They're not going to be yarded. So a young pilot might not understand that and try harder and push things more, and the experience of knowing that you've got to fly away. The best thing you can tell a young fella is just when you beat, and just let them go. I think sometimes when we're young, our egos kick in and we want to get every beast, and we want to make sure we don't leave any behind, and I think that's where we can come unstuck. Good helicopter pilots are always trying to keep the cattle mentally in a position where they're thinking, not hot or not stressed, or because they shut you out then they won't comply. It's very difficult when you start, because you're trying to fly the helicopter and you're trying to figure out the cattle of where you need to be and try and get. That's where I guess it's the most dangerous. That's why I said before to stay in with someone for as long as you can, so that you can handle the helicopter and handle the cattle before you actually go and start working, because there's no bigger pressure to be sent to a job for the first time and the manager hops in with you, or the owner, and says, we're going to go and do this paddock here. That's a lot of pressure for a young pilot, because it's the pressure of going to do a job and being paid, so you don't want to be messing up. When I first started 20 years ago, there were a lot more places that were gun-ho and not set up for helicopters, and the whole culture was how you could fly and throw a helicopter around, and then we soon worked out that we couldn't outfly them. We had to try and outthink them and handle them better, and that culture is now in the helicopter mustering industry, where the slower you go and the more efficient you are, that's a good pilot.
Thank you for watching. To support our channel and its content, liking, subscribing and hitting the notify bell does help.